of the total population. And some also other interventions. We ensure that women are represented. And not just at that, we are also ensuring that at decision-making level, which our finding also found that women are mostly excluded. So we're intentional, decision-making leadership positions, women are also given. They are not just there as participants, but they are there as, active participants. So these are some of the initiatives, just to round up, these are some of the initiatives we have put in place to ensure that tension are reduced and invariably conflicts are also averted. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Ms. Helen, for sharing your experiences. We'll be introducing the next panelist, Dr. Tarfa Abraham, who is the Deputy Director, National Institute for Legislative and Democratic Studies. And he also combines economic research, climate policy analysis, and legislative experience. His work really explores how access to financial services and fiscal policies can enhance farmers' adaptation to climate shocks and food security. He's a member of the Presidential Committee on Fiscal Policy and Tax Reforms, contributing to evidence-based climate financing and accountability frameworks. Welcome, Dr. Tarfa.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. Okay. So our first question is that we'd like to know how legislative and fiscal frameworks can be reformed to make climate and peace building interventions more inclusive, accountable, and gender responsive.
Okay, thank you very much for the background that has been given already and the contribution by the previous speaker. So I will just go straight to answering the question. How can legislative and fiscal frameworks be reformed to make climate and peace building interventions more inclusive, accountable, and gender responsive? So there are two things in this question: legislative framework and fiscal framework. First, let me begin by letting us know that Nigeria's legislative framework for climate change action is the Climate Change Act 2021. And that Climate Change Act 2021 domesticated the 2015 Paris Agreement that Nigeria is a member to, is a signatory to, and the Kyoto Protocol that Nigeria is also a part of. Now, from Kyoto Protocol to Paris Agreement, Nigeria, which are both international treaties, Nigeria domesticated the Kyoto Protocol 2021. So let us understand first that Nigeria has tried by having a Climate Change Act 2021, because if you assess African countries in general, not many African countries have a Climate Change Act. Kenya was the first in 2016, then Nigeria followed, and other countries are following. So Nigeria has started well by having a Climate Change Act to have a legislative framework for climate change coordination. And that Climate Change Act 2021 provides for the coordination of every climate change action through the establishment of National Council on Climate Change. However, that Climate Change Act has a lot of challenges that cannot allow it to work effectively as our legislative framework for climate change action coordination in Nigeria. The Paris Agreement has about 29 articles, and that 29 article Article 6 provides that countries can act voluntarily to increase their own efforts towards achieving national determined contributions that is aimed at reducing overall global emissions as a country. Now, our Climate Change Act provides for a National Council on Climate Change that is headed by a Director General, but the President of Nigeria and the Vice President of Nigeria are members of the Council. So you can see already that we have a climate change, the NCC, Nigeria Climate Change Council, that is chaired by a Director General, but have the president and vice president as members of the council, and ministers of environment and other ministers. And then the climate change, the act also empowers the Nigerian Council on Climate Change to create a secretariat that will advise the council. So you can see that while we have a climate change act to allow us to coordinate climate change efforts, the framework is loaded with a lot of gaps that will not allow the NCC function effectively. You will keep having presidency intervening, you will keep having the vice presidency office intervening, and the NCC itself will be reduced to a secretariat not being sure of what to do. So Nigeria will just be attending climate change meetings in our numbers, observing, participating, but by the time we come back, domesticating and coordinating these actions will be difficult. So we have a climate change legislative framework that needs to be amended. That's the first answer to your question. Now, on the other hand, our fiscal framework, what can be done to reform our fiscal framework? The fiscal framework, ladies and gentlemen, is our budget, which is also supported by the Fiscal Responsibility Act 2007. Our Fiscal Responsibility Act 2007 provides for a budget cost circular that serves as the forerunner to the medium-term expenditure framework upon which the budget or appropriation bill is premised. Now, what can be done? For now, our policy in Nigeria to ensure that our budget is gender responsive, climate responsive, there is no specific legal framework that can allow that to happen. All we have for now is gender policy that is separate, climate change policy that is separate, everything is separate. However, we can leverage on our Fiscal Responsibility Act through the budget cost circular so that anytime the budget cost circular is released, advocacy by civil society organizations, including P1, on the executive needs to be strong so that the president will include in that budget cost circular that all MDAs are mandated or required to ensure that their budget, projects, and programs are climate change responsive and gender responsive. Once it is included in the budget cost circular, the Ministry of Finance and Budget and National Planning will transmit that budget cost circular to all ministries, departments, and MDAs. So when they are now preparing their budget, they will ensure that all their projects and programs are climate responsive and gender responsive. Because like the background we've given states, it is clear that climate change, just like any natural disaster, is particularly flawed. It's not gender neutral. Our agricultural system is 70% rural, and women account for almost 80% of the manpower in that agricultural sector. So once there is flood and any other form of climate shock, the first sector that gets the impact is our food production system. And because women are the ones who are driving agriculture and farming, they are the first to be impacted. So it's important that MDAs also make their projects and programs to be climate and gender responsive. Like my previous colleague spoke, the AgriSAR project, for example, you will find that it has activities or projects and programs to ensure that women are empowered, smallholder women farmers are empowered to have access to farm input, agricultural extension services, access to credit, generally input that can make them more climate resilient when farming in the wider context of agroecology. So these are the two things, so that I don't overstretch the answer. How can legislative and fiscal framework be reformed? Number one, our Climate Change Act 2021 needs to be amended. There is need for, after this our Zoom meeting, to push advocacy for a bill for an act by the Senate or the House of Reps to amend the National Climate Change Act 2021 to strengthen the governance framework for the NCC, as the current architecture in that act makes it impossible for the NCC to operate. That's number one. Number two, there is need for, after the P1 Zoom meeting, it was agreed that the president in the 2026 budget cost circular should include in the budget cost circular that all MDAs should make their budget capital projects to be climate responsive and gender responsive. These are the two things that can be done from our legislative and fiscal framework to make climate and peace building interventions more inclusive, more accountable, and more gender responsive. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much, Dr. Tarfa, for the beautiful insights and recommendations. Participants can still send in their questions and answers through the chat box here, the question and Q&A chat box here on the toolbar. So we discussed them during the question and answer sessions. Thank you so much, Dr. Terfa. So we also have with us here the honor of having Hawaden Juma, who is a protection and humanitarian expert with extensive experience in managing multi-sectoral projects for conflict-affected populations in Northeast Nigeria. Hawaden Juma's focus is mainly on child protection, localization, and system strengthening. She has led community-based interventions promoting disability inclusion, safeguarding, and psychosocial support for survivors of violence, conflict, and displacement. You're welcome, Hawaden Juma.
Thank you so much for having me. Good morning.
Thank you so much. So I would like to know how climate change and resource-based conflicts uniquely affect women and girls in fragile communities. And what gender inequalities do you think, or from your experience and work, deepen these impacts?
All right, thank you so much. And it's very great to be here. And I was actually so engrossed in listening to Dr. Terfa and Ms. Helen. I actually forgot I was part of the panel at some point, but thank you so much for the question. And then I'm going to be speaking mostly on your question around my experiences in Northeast. One case point I'm going to give us is the flooding, the recent flooding that happened here in Maiduguri, and also the one we anticipated to happen in Adamawa State, which thankfully did not happen. What we noticed during this was after the excessive rainfall, of course, was the releasing of the dam, and then everyone was displaced. Women faced most of the backlash from this. We had the number of GBV cases increased significantly. We had people move out from their communities to camp settings, and we had people at LGA level having to lose their farmland, and now they had to find other source of getting food and water because waterways were also affected. So now we had women we had two contexts of this. We had issues, GBV issues at camp level, and we also had issues at LGA level where some of the communities necessarily didn't have to actually move. They were staying in the communities, but their farmlands were severely affected. So when the assessments were ongoing, we noticed that a high number of men were no longer in the community. Women had to fend for themselves. We had women, we had children. Most of the households we went to conduct like assessments, we noticed we had only women. The men were somewhat nowhere to be found. And then from all of our engagement, we noticed that there was this fear amongst the women and also the girls. And then when we inquired further, it was a lot of cases coming back at us because now the routes that they go to their farmlands and then to get water was compromised. We had abduction cases, women and girls were abducted, they were taken away. We had girls having to leave school, very importantly. And then we had so many cases of women telling us that, hey, we have so many children, we can't cater for them. So we have to, this guy wants to get married, the girl, okay. We had girls of 17, 16, 15 getting married because there was no way to spend for them. So those cases were on the rise. And this is because the flood was so much, a lot of people didn't really anticipate that it was going to get that bad. So we had so many cases going on. We had a lot of abduction cases. We had GBV cases on the rise on a daily basis. This is both in communities and also in camps. And then we had some people, for example, we had several issues of women having getting this notice that you have to leave where you are because of maybe you're renting or this, the land is not yours, the owners are coming to claim it because they were also displaced and they needed somewhere to go. So, and then in communities, you see in communities where women are not even allowed to buy land. So where do they go to? And at some point, the route from LGA to the Maiduguri city was disrupted. People could not move from one place to another. So it was a lot of issues that come into play. And the fact that women did not have access to a lot of decision making at community level to say, oh, there was an evacuation that was happening, and the men knew about it and the women did not, because they were not part of the decision making panel. They had little to nothing to say about it. So when the call was like, oh, let's move, women were left behind because they were not aware. Very few of them were. And then for them to leave and then having all the right information, it was not there. The inequality was very evident, even in terms of resources. When they were allocating funds for, okay, resettlement and all that, men received the larger share. They say, oh, we're looking for the head of the house. Women-headed households took the most heat, because we had so many complaints around, oh, before you receive this, you have to come with your husband. These are women that don't have husbands. Some of them are widows. Some of them are living on their own. So why won't you receive the service? It's simply because she's a woman. That was it. And it was escalated so far. I know there were so many efforts around this to ensure that women actually have access to this. We saw a lot of negative coping mechanisms from these women. We had women having transactional sex because they needed to survive. They needed to feed. The number of SEA cases in camps were quite evident, but the reporting was low. We had humanitarian, of course, providing support, food items, health services, and all of that. So women, particularly women-headed households, had no choice but to kind of bend to it. It was during awareness creation, a lot of awareness creation was done around or humanitarian services completely free. You can access it. People should not ask you. No one should ask you for money or for sex to receive those services. That was when those cases started coming. So the flood was really was a shock to us, and then it showed us, it kind of positioned us to think much more better, to think more strategically in terms of climate crisis, because women are completely left out at community level. They did not know about the early warning signs. They were not included in decisions around evacuations. They had a lot of children to cater for and very limited resources to do those. So for us, I think I would borrow what Dr. Terfa said. Climate shocks are not actually gender neutral. They actually magnify what exists. So it kind of made us think back to say, oh, these things are actually existing. In as much as a lot of interventions are going, we need to have more interventions targeted around ending gender inequalities in Northeast. I'm very happy to hear about what Ms. Helen was saying around Accessol, what they've done. I think it's something, I've picked quite a number of things that maybe I would reach out to her later to get to know how we can do that here at Northeast level, because those gender inequalities continue to happen. Even when maybe you start projects, you see some changes. When you leave, the sustainability of it has always been quite difficult to manage. But we are thinking more strategically. We are thinking more of having more anticipatory and preparatory actions involving women and all that. And I think we have a particular initiative that worked for Adamawa, which is a complete locally led intervention that was supported by the Nigerian Humanitarian Fund, that is targeted at anticipatory action and also gender inclusion of women in decision making of early warning systems and all that. So for us, it has been quite an experience, and I'm very happy to share, and I'm very happy to be on this one. I've learned quite a few. Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Hawa, for sharing these insights. It's really sad how women are completely left out from the examples you have given, and then that's the main reason why we're coming up with this issue, so we can showcase them and then be more deliberate on gender inclusion into climate issues or gender responsive climate justice. Thank you so much. I'll be going back to Ms. Helen. So Ms. Helen would like to know the lessons that can be drawn on mainstreaming gender in especially large-scale climate and environmental projects, and how those lessons can inform future national programs. And then would also like to know the strategies that have proven effective in ensuring that women are not just beneficiaries, but active participants and decision makers, because as Hawa Danjuma just said, because the women were not part of the decision making, they were really left out. They were not even part of the beneficiaries as a result. So how can women be not just beneficiaries, but active participants and decision makers in climate and peace building initiatives? Thank you.
Okay, so thank you. And thank you very much, Hawa, for, everything about this work we are doing is about collaboration, about partnership. There is no organization that will be able to achieve issues around climate change, issues around conflict and gender alone. So partnership is key. And I am happy that we have an office in Maiduguri, and maybe we'll take the discussion forward after this meeting. Some of the lessons we have learned in AgriSal on mainstreaming gender is the fact that when there is an intentionality in understanding some of the gender issues, there is every possibility that we'll succeed in our programming. And when I talk about intentionality, for us in AgriSal, like when we started, of course, we knew that there were risk factors, and we did a gender gap analysis and also gender-based violence risk assessment. Because we're going to be intervening in these communities, we do not want to increase the risk, because interventions have a way of increasing risk and vulnerabilities of the communities. For instance, Hawa talked about gender-based violence. For us also in AgriSal, we are aware of that. And so when we started, before we started our interventions, we have interventions around civil works. We have interventions about around land restoration and all that. So the lessons we have learned is the fact that when you're intentional about, the risk and vulnerability factors, you're able to mitigate them. We are able to prevent them before they occur. And when they occur, you're prepared for it because you have designed, some strategies, or you have put some mitigation strategies in place. And then when they happen, you're also prepared to respond to it. So this is one of the lessons we have learned, that being intentional about some of the risk factors, about the vulnerabilities that is caused by issues around climate change can help you, to come up with mitigation strategies so that you prevent it from happening. And then when it happens, you're also prepared, working, with other sectors to see how you can respond to some of these risk factors. And a typical example is the gender-based violence. Of course, it was one of the risk factors. We did service providers mapping from the onset of the project. So we were intentional. So these are some of the lessons learned, that when you're intentional, you reduce some of the risk and the vulnerabilities. We also, one other lesson we have also learned is the fact that gender-sensitive resource allocation and capacity building can go a long way to reduce the inequalities that vulnerable population, in this case, the women, are facing. So when their capacity is built, we have built their capacity on climate smart agriculture due to the effects of climate change, and we see women better prepared, to respond to these shocks. For instance, we all know the issues around flooding that happened in Maiduguri, and other states that were intervening. So we're intentional about allocating resources, and then of course you will see the fact that women are better prepared, to respond to some of these, shocks. Another lesson we have learned is the issue around the use of data. So we analyze our data. Of course, we have set out our target from the beginning of the project. We analyze our data to see if we are meeting our objectives. So it's not just about numbers, it goes beyond numbers. So for instance, if we have said all our interventions, there is 40% of women participation, what impact are these making? So the lesson we have learned is that when we set, indicators, gender sensitive indicators at the onset of the program, and then we review, from time to time, it helps us, to know how our interventions are faring and then the impact they are having. And then it also helps in targeted or tailored, interventions. So these are some of the lessons we have learned. And okay, so I also want to talk about this, which is very, very key. Talking about gender responsive budgeting. Very, very important. We have seen that because we're intentional about, the fact that women are vulnerable, and so they should also be included. So it's giving out resources, it is not just blanket. This goes to the community. We are also intentional about the number of women that should, benefit, from that. And, that has ensured in making sure that budgets also reach the vulnerable population. And in this case, we're talking about women, we're talking about, the youth, and then people that are living with disability in our communities. So,
okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Helen. Thank you so much for the recommendations too. I think I'll go further, especially with this recommendation on budgeting to Dr. Tefa. So, Dr. Tefa, building upon what Ms. Helen just said, and other lessons learned she mentioned, we'd like to know how Nigeria's policymakers can better integrate climate security and gender considerations into national budgeting and development planning, especially to enhance peace and resilience. And then what opportunities exist, especially for the National Assembly, to strengthen oversight and coordination on climate governance and environmental adaptation? Thank you. Over to you,
Okay.
Dr. Tefa.
Yes, thank you again. So let me begin with the opportunities that exist for the National Assembly. Now, remember that climate change is global in impact or in causation, as a matter of fact. The causal factors of climate change, global climate change, is global, but the impacts are local and more devastating on women. Now, for the National Assembly, the very first thing that the National Assembly needs to do is to strengthen the legal framework for climate change action in Nigeria. Our Climate Change Act 2021 is very, very weak. The National Assembly, as it is today, cannot oversight the National Council on Climate Change. Because when they go to oversight the National Council on Climate Change, that is headed by the ADG, members of the council include the president and vice president. So the DG will just say, this is what we have done, but for more detailed action, we need to wait for the president, who is the chairman of the council, and the vice president. Which National Assembly person will want to go and meet the president and be oversighting him on climate change action? And when I mean oversight, we're not talking about just visiting and saying hello and hi. We are talking about visiting every MDA and holding them to account regarding their climate change and gender responsive projects and programs. This is the project in your 2024 or 2025 budget. The project with the code ARGP so number that seeks to empower women on climate resilient farming. The project has 40 billion across the 6 geopolitical zones, targeting smallholder women farmers. Which list did you use to implement this $40 billion? Which communities and wards did women benefit from? What kind of project did those women get? What procurement process was used to procure those smart water hand pumps, solar hand pumps that you gave the women, or the fertilizers? Where did the money come from? How has it been retired? Which contractor got it and who has benefited? This is what oversight means. Now tell me which National Assembly person can engage the NCC in this manner, where the president is the chair and the vice president is the chair. It's not that the president will not answer or the vice president, but when will they have that time to attend that meeting? So we need to amend that Climate Change Act so that the governance framework for climate change action in Nigeria can be very clear. That's the first thing. Now, secondly, remember I said climate change impacts are local, they are local. Now, and every legislator has this power of constituency project. So climate change impact and effect is going on in their villages right now. The constituencies that are National Assembly members and State Assembly members, to be fair to them, and also local council climate change impacts are going on. So they need to strengthen their constituency engagement project. When they go for constituency engagement, they shouldn't go only during campaign. And they should not just go like big men, just going to wave people who came to greet them and they're just giving them what they want. They should take advantage of their constituency engagement platform to engage constituents who are the ones feeling the impact of this climate change, to ask them, how are you able to water your farms now that rain is unstable, now that drought is expanding, now that temperatures are increasing, now that biodiversity is degrading, and therefore pests that are increasing, post-harvest losses are also increasing. Dear farmers, as my constituents, what are you doing to mitigate this impact of pests and pesticide on your farming, the challenge of poor water supply on your irrigation? What are you doing? When the constituents talk, then they will now use the constituents feedback that they have to turn into what they call constituency projects. And they should partner with CSOs or NGOs in implementing those projects. Because on their own, politicians will want to implement projects and programs that will help them get re-election. So in doing that, they'll not be able to distribute or ensure access to public services in a way that address gender gaps. So you will find in a situation whereby women are the ones farming and they have challenge of having access to fertilizer. But when the trucks of fertilizers are taken to the local government, it goes to a few men who are the oligarchs of that local government, and they end up sharing the fertilizers and reselling them, and the women who are actually farming will not have access. So the key point here, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, participants, is that the National Assembly and State Assembly members, as well as local government councillors, can use their constituency office to strengthen grassroots engagement to ensure that they are able to convert that power they have in terms of engaging their constituents into turning into projects. Now, in terms of how can Nigeria's policymakers better integrate climate security and gender considerations. Now, remember this: the causality between climate change and security or insecurity is bidirectional. Climate change leads to insecurity, and insecurity worsens the impact of climate change. Both ways, women are the most affected. Where there are climate shocks or climate crises, floods, who are the most affected? Which gender will not run and leave children? It's women. Which gender go to farm and carry their children along? It's women. Which gender we have, God forbid, an outbreak of insecurity, maybe farmer-header conflict or community conflict or any form of conflict, and we don't want to leave children behind? It's women. If there is food crisis in the villages, which person suffers malnutrition, under 5 mortality, and maternal mortality? Women. Which people are quick to leave children in the village and their families and go to the city and take up security jobs and then end up not coming back in most cases, or going to seek for greener pastures without remembering children? You can see that every dimension, women are mostly affected. Our GDP data is favorable to men. We are not saying everything is against women, but the reality of our data is that our growth is not inclusive, and not ensuring that climate change is addressed in our policies and in our policies will further worsen the access to public services that women whose rights are guaranteed by the Constitution are supposed to enjoy. So the summary here is that we must recognize, our policymakers must recognize first that climate change is a security concern, just like security issues are also a climate change, also affect national development. So once they recognize that these challenges exist and their gender impacts are not neutral, then the country will begin to be more deliberate in ensuring that climate change policies are no longer gender insensitive, but address the differences that may appear in the depending on which side of the coin you are looking at. Then remember, under President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, our national development plan, because the question says, how can Nigeria policymakers better integrate? Our national development plan today is called Nigeria Agenda 2050. 2050 is far away, but the medium-term plan we have today under President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is the Renewed Hope Agenda. As of this moment, the Renewed Hope Agenda is still a federal government action plan that is being implemented. If you look at our 2025 budget, Renewed Hope Agenda is everywhere. Renewed Hope Initiative for Health, Renewed Hope Initiative for Agriculture. It's everywhere in the budget. But where is the document coordinating how much was determined for which project, who will benefit and how? This is the question we're asking. So the policymakers, including the National Assembly, CSOs, media should hold the government account. By first of all, you praise them. You say, Mr. President, we thank you for putting Renewed Hope Agenda everywhere. We say Renewed Hope Housing, Renewed Hope Agriculture, Renewed Hope Health, Renewed Hope. But where is the master plan upon which these programs are being run? Who determines who will benefit? How were the vulnerable groups in that set determined? Who is dispensing what and how are they getting it? How is the conditional cash transfer working in that regard? These are the things, and government cannot implement these things and leave CSOs aside, because government by nature will not be able to ensure that these things address the challenges that our country actually face. So in summary, we need to legislate our policies. That is where I'm going. Renewed Hope Agenda, if it is not legislated, by 2027, it might be discarded. It's important to legislate our policies and then ensure that it is not just a federal policy, but also state and local government, so that whatever the center is doing, which is the federal government, state and local government can follow suit. And lastly, ensure that that policy document upon which the government is using to address insecurity, address climate change issues, address sexual and gender-based violence and other factors that affect the livelihood of women are not just talked about, but there's a policy framework where we can access or go to know who gets what, when, and how. And it should be accessible, available on website, social media platform, and even in government offices in different languages at federal, state, and local government level, so that everybody will know what the government is doing and what they need to do on their own part to have access to those programs. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for those beautiful insights, Dr. Terfa. Thank you. So over to you, Hawa. Before that, please, the participants can keep answering the polls. You'll see polls coming up, so please keep clicking and answering them, and then keep your questions coming through the Q&A chat bar. We'll refer back to them during the question and answer sessions. Thank you very much. So Hawa, what role do you think localization play in ensuring that humanitarian responses to climate-induced crises are sustainable, inclusive, and gender responsive? We also know that you have extensive field experience in the Northeast. So what local examples can you give us that can demonstrate how women's participation in peace building has mitigated conflicts arising from climate-related pressures? Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. So I will start with the first question around localization. So I think when it comes to ensuring that humanitarian response response to climate-induced crisis, the sustainability of it, and also inclusiveness and gender responsive, I think localization is important. I always say this: localization is actually a long-term sustainable way of intervening, humanitarian intervention. So it's very essential, because local actors, they know the context, they understand the power dynamic, and then they know what is culturally appropriate in each community that we work. So their leadership will make responses very quick. It's also cheaper, and it's going to be more accepted because they understand the context, they work with the context, they work with the people. So I think that is very important. So to talk about gender responsiveness when it comes to localization, I think it will be very important when we want to ensure that localization is happening and it's gender responsive. We need to empower more community-based women organizations, women-based community organizations. When you go to communities now in Northeast, you see a lot of community-based organizations, but most of them are youth-led. I think about the ones I've come across, 80% of them are youth-led. I've never seen a community-based women organization that is led by women that understands the context and the needs of women. They have always been youth-led, right? And when it's youth-led, the inclusion of women has really not been there. So how do we access direct funding to community-based women organizations? We do have women-led organizations at national level, sub-national level. We have a lot of them, but we need to have them also empowered at community level, because localization is the sustainability platform. This is where the transition is going to. Even the humanitarian intervention now is transitioning. It's transitioning, and it's transitioning very quickly. So when we transition completely without putting into consideration providing capacity for women in terms of technical capacity, them understanding what climate change is, how do they apply that to women? How do they address the need of women? How are they also put in committees of like early warning system committees? How are they also making decisions around climate triggers in their communities, in their local governments, and all of that? So I think it's going to be very important to have this. Let them have their capacity strengthened. Let them have the understanding, the technical understanding of what they are going to be working on what the sustainability is going to look like for women. Also, maybe their financial capacity, they're able to receive funding, they're able to utilize it, and they're also able to make really great impact. So I think this is going to strengthen the voices of women for decision making in their communities, because they have a say. They have a say in whatever it is, and they are part of the sustainability platform, the sustainability strategy that we all keep talking about. So I think also it's very important for them to be part of, for them to feel that local ownership. The ownership is not just the business as usual. When you have meetings in communities now and you say, oh, I want to have, for example, let me bring it down to child protection. You want to have community-based child protection committees. And then you say, oh, let's have the members. You see like 7 men and the 3 women. And when you're having the meeting, you're seeing the women sitting at the back and just looking like, oh, let the men talk. So I think that needs to change. We need to have women lead this process. We need to have what the needs are, because women understand those needs. And most of the interventions, you notice that the voices of women are there, but it's not as strong when it comes to localization. When we will talk about sustainability, we want to see that it's done in such a way that when we go forward, we're come of women there. So I think it's very essential. Localization is not I always say this, isn't a nice extra. It's a very important pathway to sustainable gender sensitive climate response. So I think it's something that is very essential, and it's when we follow this agenda and then we empower women-based organizations, it's going to go a long way. And to answer your second question, I'm going to give you a very short scenario. I'm very proud of this story. I think this is one of the key stories when it comes to women in peace building and climate change. I always talk about. It's one of the LGAs. We had a situation in one of the LGAs here in Borno State, where we got to a point where the land was actually quite dry. Everything was going, the major source of fuel was firewood. So women had to go there, you have to be the ones to cut down trees, get firewood, and then the over dependence on that was really high. And the fact that they are contributing to deforestation was also very high, because we had limited number of trees already. We had limited number of trees already in the community, and then everyone is going to cut down the tree because that's the only source of fuel of fire at the community. So there was a lot of conflict among the women. A lot of it got, there was a lot of fights, there was a lot of disputes, the other are also conflicting. The tension was very high because there was no firewood anywhere. The trees are gone. You're not planting the tree, you're cutting it down, and what you actually need them. So we had this women peace group that came together, and then this idea of briquettes making came about, and they were like, oh, you can actually turn waste into clean, safe, and sustainable fuel. Like it's easy to get, it's easy to utilize, and it doesn't actually contribute to the deforestation. We can also come together and say, oh, let's plant trees maybe in front of our houses or just close by somewhere so the trees can grow while we use this for fuel. It actually, this simple act, it solved everything. There was a training done by one of our UN partners through a partner on briquette making, and they're using it. They used it, they did the planting of trees and everything. In a few weeks, everything died, like the whole situation died down. There was fire for them to cook, planting trees, and then the women, the tension go down, everybody became, it's one of the, it was a few group of women that started this peace group, and it expanded a little bit. And then before you know it, there were so many women coming to contribute. As I speak to you right now, this women group still exists. So when there are issues in communities around tension, around women issues or children, anything that has to do with women or children, they always come together to bring solution on how to solve it. I think for me, that was a really great success story because this was done at community level. So imagine when we replicate this across other places, across LGAs where women's voices are not even heard. They don't even have the voice to come out and say, oh, hey, we have something to see. And I always say this. I said I want to be biased a little bit. I say women are the best peacekeepers in the world. I always say this. So I say if we have women across LGAs, across communities, having this initiative, having this voice, coming up with ideas, it's going to go a long way to solve a lot of problems for all of us. Thank you, and over.
Thank you very much, Howard. That example is really, really excellent. Thank you. I think I'll share one of the strategies too we do in P1, especially with regards to peace building. we are really keen on instituting community-based women platforms like the women mediators, the mixed observer teams, who contribute to peace building at grassroots communities, and they're really making wonders. Thank you very much. So I'll move to Ms. Helen. So Ms. Helen, would like to know from your experience how we can move from gender add-ons to gender transformative programming that shift power relations and decision-making at all levels, Thank you, and over.
Okay, so yeah, so thank you so much. And this is a very apt discussion because it actually resonates with what is happening in the community. I just want to comment quickly on what the last speaker has said before I answer my question. I can't agree with you any less, Hawa, when you talked about the issue of localization. And the localization has to happen at the community level. If we want sustainable solutions, then localization is the way to go. So of course, we're thinking globally, but we're localizing, the solutions. So solutions must come from the local community. The people that are in it, they will be able to, proffer solutions that will help in either mitigating or solving some of these problems. And I also want to talk about the issue you raised about women leadership. Now, in my years of experience, especially working with the communities, there was a community we went and we talked about formation of women committees. It was in water and sanitation. And we had a compound meeting with the women, and we now said, okay, one of the requirements is you have to form a committee, WASH committee. Of course, we want women committees because that community we went, it was women in seclusion mostly. They are not allowed to come out, so they don't attend meetings and all that. So, of course, we said, yes, it can still work. Let's form WASHCOM women committees. And when we sat with the women and we said, elect your leader, maybe the president or whatever, the women said, no, we can't lead. Call our men. So that is that coming from the women. And why is it that they have been, they have been trained, they have been socialized, our cultural and social norms, our traditional norms have instilled that in them that they can't lead. So even though there was opportunity for them to be leaders now, they still saw themselves as inadequate. Call our men. It is our men that should lead the group. And one other issue I've seen in the area of women leadership is the fact that the women don't believe in themselves. One is because the capacity is not there. So if you say, I am a leader, what are those things that I'm supposed to do? So we must be intentional about issues around building the capacity of women, to hold leadership positions or to lead. And I'm not talking about maybe the national level, even at the community level. We must be intentional about capacity building so that our women, so probably women are not aspiring to be in leadership position because they don't have what it takes. So we must be intentional about building the capacity of women, to lead, building their capacity to be in leadership position. So that is just by the way. Now, coming to the question of how do we move from gender add-ons to transformative programming? So when we say gender add-ons, is just the fact that, okay, we have started and issues have started coming in. So we are just, giving like handouts. Okay, this is a gender issue. Okay, how do we do? how do we, or what can we do? Then we just do it. It's a one-off thing, and we go on our programming. If we're programming that way, there is no way we can see, transformation, or we can see change in what we're doing. So for me, one of the ways, we can move from add-ons to gender transformative programming is the fact that we must treat gender issues, with the strength, with all the seriousness it requires. It shouldn't just be something that is on a checklist and we're ticking. For instance, we're going for training, invite 10 women. That is what we want. 10 of the participants must be women. Okay, so we have told the community to invite 10 women, and then we come and then we tick it. Yes, we have invited women. So what is the level of participation and what is the impact? We don't actually, care to know. So for me, one of the ways we can, move from the add-ons is to shift from the way we are treating, gender issues. Sad to say that sometimes even programs that integrate gender, the management don't even understand why gender should be in the program. Probably the donor have designed the program and said gender integration must be part of it. But the person or the persons that are managing or at the helm of affairs of that program don't even understand why we should integrate gender. So gender issues, so gender is treated with, laxity, and even sometimes the funds to implement gender activities are not even there. So sometimes you have to rely. I am talking from experience. I have been on a project where I went and my salary, my budget for the whole year, and that is a huge project. It was a huge project. My budget for the whole year was less than 300, was less than 3 million. That is for the whole year for gender activities. So we must shift from, we must deepen our knowledge on why do we even have to integrate gender. So when we do that, we'll be able to, understand why we should, integrate gender in programming and then give it all the seriousness, it deserves. The other way is what I have talked about. For me, if you're designing a program and then gender mainstreaming or gender integration is part of it, you must be able to do your analysis so that if you're providing interventions, they are deeply rooted in the findings of your analysis. And that way, you will treat it with all the seriousness, it deserves. The other thing for me is the issue of training and capacity building at all levels. Now, I've talked about the fact that sometimes gender mainstreaming is just treated as add-on because people don't even understand. When you're talking about gender, they don't understand where you're coming from. And if people don't understand, there is every possibility that they wouldn't give it, the required, push or the required resources that is needed, to implement that. So when people's capacity is built, for instance, from the federal, from the state, from the local government, and even the community level where the intervention is taking place, we must be intentional about capacity building. Let people understand why we are doing what we are doing. And that way, we'll move from, treating gender integration has add-ons, to transformative. And then we must ensure that vulnerable population, women are not just beneficiaries, but they are leaders, they are landowners, and they are decision makers. And for us in AgriSal, That is what we are moving towards. So gender is not just about numbers, but we're also, working to see impact of interventions. And for us, we can boldly say that in some of our communities, we have women leading mixed groups. So when I say mixed group, they are community interest groups that have both men and women are leading. When I say leading, they are the chairperson of the committees at that community level. It looks something that will never have happened, but with the capacity building, we are seeing some of these transformative, ideas coming, or transformative ways of doing things, by in the community. And also, we're seeing women, owning lands now or having access to land, which they were not having before. A typical example is our activities in Nasarawa and others, and in Adamawa, and other states, where the states have allocated land to the community to do regenerative agriculture. And of course, women are also giving their own share of the land, to cultivate. So these are some of the ways we ensure that gender integration is not just add-on, but is transforming how the communities are thinking and is shifting cultural and social traditional gender roles. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Ms. Helen. We'll be going to question and answers now. And the floor is open for your questions, reflections, and contributions. Please use the chat box or use the chat box to share your thoughts. We have a couple of questions here. The first one is from Medina Ismail. She said, why did climate change affect the community at large? And I think I'll pass this question to Dr. Terfa.
Yeah, okay. Let me know. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, great. The question was it's a very brilliant one. Why does climate change affect the community at large? Now, this is it. Let me give a good context to it. Our climate change in general is global. In other words, we have a common weather and climate system. For West Africa, for Africa general, we are all dealing with one global greenhouse gas. Remember, from basic SS3 geography class, we teach environment as global warming is like a big blanket that covers the whole earth. So, but because of our activities as people on earth, the way we cut down trees, the way we industrialize and pollute the air, the way we use nuclear power unsustainably, the way we don't preserve our forest and green reserves, all these things, the way we also spoil our biodiversity through unsustainable activities like bush burning, all these things weaken that blanket that covers the earth. So the thickness of that blanket that covers the earth is getting thinner. And once it's getting thinner, the earth is exposed to increased heating or warming, which leads to different impact across the continent. For us in Africa, we get that impact by way of increased warming, like higher temperatures, which leads to higher supply issues, worsening desertification, increases drought. Then for you and I, whose parents or whose communities are agricultural dominant, and we depend largely on rainfall and irrigation, the water channels to irrigate our farms becomes difficult. The soil quality to ensure that we have the required harvest per yield per farm is also weakened. And the cost of accessing energy also becomes worse, thereby weakening our purchasing power, worsening poverty, And our parents, our people in the rural areas, resort to cutting down trees for firewood or firewood, thereby depleting forests and making us even more exposed to this climate change. So while the climate change impact or cost is global, every local government, every ward, every community feels that impact in a unique way. And for Nigeria, we feel it mostly through flooding, through erosion. This is the way we feel it the most, like in Jigawa, like you saw, like in Niger State that you saw, and across the nation in different ways. We also feel it through increase in heat, which leads to malaria, and the increase in tsetse fly, which herders, people who are into cattle rearing, they are exposed a lot to this trypanosomiasis diseases that affect their cow. So this is why we feel it locally, deeply. Then guess what? Because of the increased warming, under 5 mortality is also high. Women who are pregnant cannot survive. And remember, in most cases, these women are also going to farms. So you have a situation whereby the dry season is expanding, the rainy season is contracting. People who are supposed to have access to fertilizers from government is doing their best, but it is not actually reaching those people who it is made to reach. So all those access to land, credit, fertilizers that these women farmers need to make them resilient, to make them cope with the hardship of climate change, they are not getting it. If you listen to what Madam said, the previous speaker, she was very careful. She did not say women are now becoming landowners. She said women are now having access to land, because women who need access to land to farm, some are not even getting it because of cultural barriers that women cannot have own land. So we left the narrative. We said, okay, we don't want to own land. Give us access to land. But because of insecurity, you can see the choice of our topic. Because of insecurity in our villages, which is mostly in the forest, women who used to trek into the bush to engage in large-scale farming are now running away from the bush from the forest and to bring their farm closer to home. And the soil quality for those lands closer to home cannot have very good yield. And the land in the forest, they cannot go because of kidnapping, terrorism, banditry, all these activities. So you can see this challenge. So this is why climate change impact is local and very terrible. So the more your community, my community, is dependent on agriculture, the more we are impacted by the challenge of climate change and insecurity. And the more our governments at federal, state, and local need to respond to ensure that the livelihood of people who are farming is not just sustainable, but able to keep them still farming. Now, remember, in these communities, many children trek very long distances to school. So once there's insecurity, even out-of-school children increase. And once the family is difficult, families will begin to choose whether the child should go to farm or to go to school. So because of the insufficient action we are taking on climate change, we are rolling back every gain we have made in every other aspect of development, in education, in health, in access to water, sanitation, and hygiene, and other factors. So it's important to address those barriers, the unique barriers. Remember, one of the speakers said that the action must be local. The way it is affecting somebody in Gambarungala, for example, in Borno, or Bomosho, or somewhere in Ojo, or Badagry, or in Agaye, Niger State, or in Katsina, Benue State, is different. So you need local knowledge to ask them, how does climate change affect you in this local community? And what kind of resilient activity do we need to build to get them to address those challenges? Remember again, the climate change programs we are talking about, it's not just putting it in the budget and saying mainstreaming climate and gender and climate. But those activities, those programs must be broken down into specific action programs. For example, empowering 100 women farmers with solar-powered hand pumps to address the challenge of irrigation, giving access to credit to 1,000 women farmers in social local government to enable them have access, move their goods from farm to market. So, but the way government does it, they'll just go to the budget and say 40 billion for climate change action across the 36 states. You cannot track it like that, which is why I keep saying there's need to partner with CSOs and people who have mind in saying that development actually takes place, so that they can help you benchmark how these programs will be implemented and achieved. So it is not climate program if we cannot break it down. We must be able to capture it and ensure that it addresses both women, the needs that of women, and then also address climate change. Then as I wrap up, let me say this. 2026 budget is coming. One of the biggest contributions I'd like to make using this very privileged platform is that we need to rally our voice together to let the Minister of Economic Planning know that when the budget call circular is released for ministries, departments, and agencies to prepare their budget, let them include in the budget all MDAs are to ensure that their projects and programs are climate change and women responsive and gender responsive. We need to have this statement in the budget call circular. Otherwise, you cannot force any MDA to include a project that is gender or climate change sensitive, because MDAs follow law, they follow actions that the government provides for in the Fiscal Responsibility Act that translates into the budget call circular and ultimately becomes the Appropriation Act, upon which the procurement law follows and they begin to implement projects and programs. So this is what I would like to say. Climate change is global, but the impact is local. So all actions must be local. And for actions to be local, state budget must capture those, must include projects that address those local challenges. And federal government budget must also include those projects. But for them to do that, the government must tell them, instruct them to do so.
Okay, it seems Dr. Tafa's network went off. Thank you so much for answering this question comprehensively, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we have some comments too. Fatima Alpha, from all the discussions so far, can we say cultural barriers are among the factors affecting climate change in the community? Sure. Shamsu Muhammad Ambursa also said, glad to be part of this amazing session. It's quite educative and informative to listen and share with others about how gender equality can impact women and their communities. Another interesting comment here is Aisha Haruna Kabuga. She said, I want this type of program to be made in our local language for more understanding for our local women, Hausa, Igbo, and Yoruba. Please, P1. So I'm delighted to inform you that P1 is in the process of creating webinar series in local languages. And then just stay tuned. Very soon, you'll get this in our local languages. Fatima Alpha, I suggest environmental courses should be made compulsory. When it comes to gender sensitive, why is it that always about women? This one is from an anonymous attendee. Thank you. Haja Hadiza said, I used to think that climate is a thing of nature which cannot be changed, but to my greatest surprise, is a lot of issues are coming out of climate change. Another question from Aisha. She said, where women and children are affected with any damage concerning climate change and gender-based violence, no support for the survival. Why? I think I'll match this question with this, where Dr. Eric said, how can women be involved in decision-making processes on issues like climate change and conflict that affect them most, more than just talking and having no impact physically? And I'll be grateful if Ms. Helen John can answer this question. Support for survivors of GBV and climate change damages, and then how women can be more involved in decision-making processes on issues on issues like climate change and conflicts.
Okay, so thank you. The first one is around GBV, where there are no services or support, yes, support services for survivors. Yeah, I have worked in that terrain, and I know that even though we are not yet there in responding to the needs of GBV survivors, but I know that we are making progress. I know that some states have sexual assault centers where survivors of sexual gender-based violence are taken there and they receive, additional care. When I say additional care, of course, when you're talking about sexual gender-based violence, most times if it happens in the community, the first place of call is either the police station or the primary health care center within their locality. But I know that there are some states in response to that, caring for survivors of SGBV, they have sexual assault referral centers at the state level, and then some at the local government level. Even though I also appreciate the fact that it is not all states that we have it, but at least we are making progress. And apart from that, I know there are NGOs that are they are working in the area of responding to survivors of gender-based violence, and they have done GBV service providers mapping, to link survivors of gender-based violence, to these service providers. For us in AfriSouth, we have done that. In the state we are working, we have mapped out gender-based violence service providers, looking at the health sector, looking at the psychosocial sector, looking at the security, shelter, and all other sectors. And we have done, like a register on where you can get what service for gender-based violence. So I don't know which states the person that is answering the question is from, but please check in your state. I'm sure you will have something like that, service providers that are responding to survivors of gender-based violence. And of course, like I said, even though we are not there yet, but we're making progress, in that direction. So just ask around. I'm sure you will find service providers that are providing services to gender-based violence survivors. So the second question is, why are we talking about women when we're talking about issues that has to do with climate change, of course, and it affects everyone? That's the second question, right? Aisha?
Hello, yes, please.
All right, so this is the question we keep getting when you talk about women, when you talk about gender, but I was careful when I started. I said, gender is not just about women. Gender is about all of us in the community. So whether you're a man, a woman, pastoralist, farmer, header, people living with disability, youth, children, that is what gender is all about. Having said that, when we're talking about gender, we are talking about issues around equity. And there has been a lot of researches, to establish the fact when we're talking about people that are most vulnerable, people that are most disadvantaged, most times you find out it is the women, it is the children, people living with disability, and all that. And apart from that, in gender studies, we have issues around intersectionality. And what intersectionality is saying is that there are some people that have another layer of vulnerability than the one they already have. So take for instance, we all know that women are the most vulnerable, mostly when we go to our communities, and they are the most disadvantaged. Just like, we discussed issues around decision-making, mostly you find out that the women are not on the decision table, when decisions are being made. Now, start even from the national. Start from the national. Look at the National Assembly. Look at the House of Reps. Look at come to the state level, right? look at your state. How many dispensation did we have women as either governor, women as deputy governors, not as governors. Now, if you go to the national, if you go to the state House of Assembly, it is the same thing in a whole House of Assembly levels, and then you come also to the local government level and then to the community level. You find out that women are hardly on that decision table.
It seems her network is also bad. So I'll go to the other questions. We are noting all the contributions, especially around creating more awareness, more capacity building, more awareness in our local dialects with regards to the subject matter of discussion. So I'll take the last question and I'll refer it to Hawa and Juma. The anonymous attendee said, I listened to all the panelists on their submission, but none of them give statistics of numbers of children and women affected by climate change in the country or in northern Nigeria. Because through data, that is when stakeholders will take action. I don't know from northern Nigeria. Over to you, Hawa.
Okay. Thank you so much for raising that very important point. It's actually right. I know a lot of people will be talking around feedback. But nonetheless, it's actually a very critical point. So I can maybe give some few assessments that we have the one.
No, I'm back. Can anybody hear me?
Yeah.
Hawa, it seems you're fading, your network is also bad. So to conclude on what Hawa, or to build on what Hawa just presented, I think we mentioned some figures at the introductory part of this webinar, and then some statistics that stated that across over 35 states across Nigeria witnessed devastating floods, and then over 5.2 million Nigerians were affected, more than 1 million displaced, mostly women, thousands injured, and critical infrastructure and farmlands were wiped out. So in order to not take much of our time, I think we'll be sharing these materials with all the participants so we can have a more robust understanding of the issues. Thank you very much for the insightful questions. Thank you very much for the questions. They're very thoughtful. They really underscore the importance of having this over and over again, and then the importance of also linking climate change resilience with social justice and inclusive governance. So at this point, I would like to invite Ijoma Igwe, our Senior Program Officer at P1, to share a concise summary of the key takeaways from today's rich discussion. Ijoma, over to you, please. Okay, so it seems Ijeoma's network is also not forthcoming. I think we'll be sharing P1's public fact sheets. They have all the data, all the resources, and reports from this meeting will be shared too. With this, I think we can bring today's event to a close. And on behalf of the Rule of Law and Empowerment Initiative, also known as Partners West Africa, Nigeria, we are a non-governmental, women-led, women-driven organization dedicated to enhancing citizens' participation and promoting security and good governance in Nigeria and West Africa. Our approach is collaborative advocacy, partnership, and peace building. So I would like to thank our facilitators for the robust discussion. Thank you so much for being with us today. I would also like to thank our participants, our partners, our supporters for joining this meaningful conversation. A special appreciation goes to Mrs. Kemi Okenyedo, our Executive Director, for her leadership and vision, and to the entire P1 team for making this webinar possible. So please stay connected with us as we continue this webinar series. As I said earlier, our next session will hold early next year, and we'll be diving deeper into the intersection of climate change, peace building, and social inclusion. Until then, let's continue working together towards a Nigeria that is very peaceful, equitable, and resilient in the face of climate change and climate justice. We have our head office in Abuja, we have state offices in Kano, Maiduguri, Niger, Kaduna, Katsina, Kebbi, and Plateau, and we're happy to connect or provide support in any way we can. Please visit our social media handles and our website, www.partnersnigeria.org, for more information on us and about what we do. Thank you very much once again, and have a wonderful day ahead, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.